You're listening to the Business for Good podcast, the show where you'll hear inspirational stories about companies making money by solving some of the world's most pressing problems. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and I'm glad you've joined us. Hello, friend, and welcome to episode 165 of the Business for Good podcast. We have gotten a lot of positive feedback on the last episode with venture capitalist and author Nick Cooney. I'm glad that so many people got a lot out of it. I certainly enjoyed reading Nick's latest book, and I was pleased to talk with him about it. Now, speaking of authors from Philadelphia like Nick, it appears that we've got a bit of a theme right now on this show, as this episode is with even more authors from the city of brotherly love. These folks, however, are not venture capitalists like Nick. Instead, they are entrepreneurs themselves, and successful ones at that. In the restaurant world, infant mortality is the norm. Nearly 2/3 of new eateries shut down in their first year. Only 1 in 5 lives to see its 5th birthday. So when a restaurant, and not just any restaurant, but a plant-based fine dining spot, thrives for decades, it's not just impressive, it's almost mythic. Enter Rich Landau and Kate Jacoby, the married duo behind Vedge, V-E-D-G-E, the acclaimed Philadelphia restaurant that has helped redefine what plant-based food can be. With nods from Bon Appétit, GQ, Food and Wine, and the James Beard Foundation, Rich and Kate have built more than a restaurant. They have built a movement, one that proves that vegetables don't need to play second fiddle, that they can actually own the stage themselves. Now, I don't know how these two do it. My wife and I love each other, but even the suggestion of collaborating on a work project sends us both reaching for diplomatic escape routes. Yet somehow, Rich and Kate not only run a business together, they do it with passion, purpose, and of course, with pastry. Rich got his start in the 90s with Horizons, which I was very proud to have been a customer of. It was a bold bet on vegetable-forward cuisine back when people didn't even know how to pronounce vegan, let alone what it meant. And Kate joined with a background in hospitality, bringing a refined palate and a pastry chef's touch. But this episode isn't just about food. It's about values, about running toward the hard things, about how two people built something meaningful together and stuck with it through all the chaos the restaurant industry throws one's way. If you're a foodie, an entrepreneur, or just a fan of staying married while doing the impossible, this episode is going to be for you. Kate and Rich, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You know, I've eaten not only at Vedge, but I'm so old school that I've eaten at Horizons. And,
wow. That was yes. Before the internet, man. I mean,
it's actually funny when I first stopped eating animals in 1993, my parents were quite concerned and they wanted me to see a nutritionist. And so I did not even know what a nutritionist was, but they got out the yellow pages. There was no Google, and they got out the yellow pages to look up a nutritionist. And they brought me to one in Rockville, Maryland, who unbelievably in 1993, like by the grace of God, happened to be vegan herself.
Wow.
Which is really what are the chances?
Yeah, I mean, it must have been such a needle in a haystack, of course. But no, I loved Horizons and I love Vedge. And so I'm really glad to be talking with you. But let me ask you, you guys have withstood the test of time in the restaurant world. You have been at this now for decades. Your plant-based diet makes you look much younger than you are, but you've been at this for decades. But not everybody's been so fortunate. There's been headline after headline of plant-based restaurants going under. Some call it an extinction level event. It's everything from fast food to fine dining. You see a lot of plant-based restaurants adding meat to their menus to try to stay in business. You all, though, have survived the test of time. What's going on? I want to know, what do you think is the problem that is causing this? And what have you done that has made you immune from these woes?
That's a great question. I'll say first, though, when I told my parents I was going vegetarian, they sent me to a psychiatrist. So, the fact that they sent you to a nutritionist is some degree of acceptance. So that's why you turned out so good, man.
That's really good. That's very good. They really lost your mind.
Yeah, no, but hey, eventually on the nights I cooked, no one seemed to complain. So that's how it all started, really, when I was about 15. Yeah. So in all seriousness, we are witnessing this. We've actually gotten calls from several colleagues, old friends, and some other people around the country. I'm not at liberty to mention who they are, but, asking for help. And we see their books and, you basically see a slide in sales. And when it comes down to business, and restaurants are a business. I learned this the hard way. I was the artist in the beginning. I just wanted people to try my art. It was all about the art. I didn't care about the money. And then I basically, my dad took me to his accountant and he just beat the crap out of me. And he just shook my hippie self and said, dude, you got to wake up. You got to get real about business. This is a business. Great that you have art. Great that you're cooking. But if you don't know how to run a business, you're done. You might as well just pack it up now and get yourself a real job. So when you see this slide in sales and revenue, and I don't know if it's so much just a plant-based thing, it's all over the restaurant industry. So I don't know if it's exclusive to what we do. You have to manage what you have. You read all about these airlines. They take in billions in revenue, yet they declare bankruptcy. Well, isn't that a matter of like just managing what you're taking in? You could take in $100 a week in sales. If you manage it well, you might be able to walk with 30. And be able to, eat for another week. So I think we're seeing the big test of, listen, most people who open up a vegan restaurant, it's a mission-based venture. We believe in something. Anyone who gets into vegan food just for the money, I mean, come on, there's very, very few of them out there. And, if you got into a vegan restaurant just for the money, you're not that smart. You deserve to go out of business. But most of us got into it because we believe in it. We believe in it deeply, whether it's for the environment, for the animals, for our personal health. We believe in this. And therefore, we're not really tuned into the business side of it. And you have to really watch it. And you've got to watch it all the time. They're like weeds in your garden. If you don't get ahead of it, it will get out of control. And it is very, very, very hard to fix once it's gotten bad.
But I think there was a minute 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when maybe some people were interested in like taking advantage of what was becoming so trendy with vegan and plant-based. I mean, when Rich started out in 94, I joined up with him in 2001, and we were always kind of walking on eggshells talking about what we did. We talked about the food. We never really wanted to put the V in front of anything. Like we just, kind of wanted to say, this is all about delicious food, cast the widest net possible. And when we branded as Vedge back in 2011, that was exactly the mission. It was to open a vegetable restaurant because everybody eats vegetables. Not everybody is vegetarian or vegan every day, but everyone eats vegetables. So that was the idea, to reach a broad audience. And I think at some point, again, like late teens there, I think some people are like, hey, wait a second, this is catching on. And we have a friend, colleague, who I saw him transform, and he was like bragging to us about all the plant-based milk that he has in his fridge at home, whereas he used to make fun of us. So I think there was a moment where people started to say, hey, we can capitalize on this. But I think at this moment, what we're talking about, it has been a little bit of a shift that all the folks in plant-based circles have acknowledged, that it's sort of like, where did the momentum go? And, our son is 17, and he tells us like the sort of different interpretations you can find online about vegan diets and plant-based diets and things. So it's interesting to think about how the narrative has been explored in different circles. And I guess it kind of depends who you follow, who you listen to, and what kind of support you get.
Yeah, I mean, you're making an excellent point, I think, about how, let's say 6 years ago or 5 years ago, the plant-based space was on fire. You had celebrities opening up plant-based restaurants. You had literally billions of dollars flowing into startups that were trying to replace meat. You had valuations that were sky high, including pre-revenue startups with literally $1 billion valuations. That's how competitive it was to get into these financing rounds for some of the plant-based companies. Today, the venture capital has largely dried up, not entirely, but largely dried up for a lot of the plant-based food tech startups. The restaurants are going under, not all of them, but many of them are. It does feel like it may not just be poor management of money. Maybe it is. Maybe you have a lot of people who don't know anything about business, who just, care about animals or the environment or whatever, and they want to start a restaurant. But it does seem like there is something different, right? I mean, it does, we see even in meat demand, right? Per capita meat demand has gone up, not down, right? Per capita meat demand in America is higher now than it was 5 years ago. And so I wonder, is there something culturally that is happening that is providing headwinds for the plant-based space? I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but it feels like it's a different market.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think, I kind of saw this whole storyline play out when Beyond and Impossible hit the market. I think I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I think it was kind of an obvious thing to see. I was a huge supporter of these products when they first came out, and we still eat them every now and then. I think they're delicious, and they remind me. It's the first product that came out that, kind of mimicked that big, thick burger you might remember from having, as a kid, or the ones you see on TV that you can't have. They did an amazing job with these products. And what I love them, not just because I love to indulge in them every now and then, but I love that they show people in a very, very easy kind of, quick trick way, what we've been trying to do for years, that people love good food. They love flavor. They love, it's not really meat that tastes good. It's, what the chefs do to it. And if you can synthesize that flavor of meat and put it in something that resembles meat, well, what do you say? The curtain's pulled back, and you can now see that it was never really about meat in the first place, because you can actually mimic it. So I felt it was a great transitional product. It actually led more people to us. It showed people in places you would never see a vegan cafe out in the middle of the country that, wait a second, I don't have to eat meat. I don't have to put any cholesterol in my body, and I can get the same satisfaction. I thought it was wonderful. But I said this to Seth, the owner of or creator of Tofurkey. He came to visit us one time at Vedge. And I said, man, I love where this is right now. This is about 6 years ago or so. But I am worried about where it's going once the people who love meat start saying, what's in that stuff? And that's exactly what's happened. They've kind of like said it's ultra processed. It's not that good for you. It's loaded in sodium. I mean, I think that's all kind of bullshit, because all foods can be bad for you if they're done improperly. So our cat is terrorizing us right now. You're going to hear a few bumps. It's either him at the door or him.
I will say, it makes me wonder, right? So maybe the so-called ultra processing claim is sticking, but when somebody goes to Burger King and they have their choice between a regular Whopper and an Impossible Whopper, are they really not buying the Impossible Whopper because it contains methyl cellulose? I wonder, is that really the thing that's holding them back? Part of me just thinks, well, in an inflationary environment where people have less money, are they willing to spend more for these products? Maybe they would if they thought they were really much better for them, but maybe not. I really think that if you track how the economy is doing, it generally tracks with per capita meat demand. And so anyway, I've wondered, if you look at the last time per capita meat demand dipped in the United States, it was after the Great Recession, and it's been on a steady march ever since. And then once you had an inflationary environment coming in and people having less money, they were spending less on foods that cost more. And Beyond and Impossible, no matter how good they taste, are not slightly more than meat. They're dramatically more than meat.
Yes.
Even before Beyond raised their prices, which they have done recently, but even before then, 2 Beyond burgers were like $6.99 for their quarter pounders. So, it's like $14 a pound retail, right? $14 a pound retail. That's not 30 or 40% more expensive than conventional hamburgers at the supermarket. That's like 300 or 400%.
So, that's a great point, though. But, who are they catering to, really, is what it comes down to. You're not really catering to the Burger King and McDonald's crowd. They say that, time is the new currency as we get older. Well, what can you do to get more time? You can prolong your life by, taking care of your health, by not consuming cholesterol. It's kind of proven that you're probably going to do better in the long run. And therefore, if you do have money, you have the ability to shop at Whole Foods all the time, not just for the luxury items. You can shop at Whole Foods. You can dine at fine dining vegan restaurants. You can do vegan tasting menus. And you can, without blinking, get the Beyond Burger over a beef burger. So maybe the miscalculation is that they've said, well, let's go for the Burger King crowd because they'll want this. And listen, Burger King's the number one litter I see in our area. Maybe it's a crowd that just isn't ready to embrace it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Rich, because I walk my dog along the Sacramento River pretty often, and I see a lot of litter. And I was thinking, I know that plant-based has arrived when I start seeing plant-based milk cartons.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think, oh, okay. Well, I'm not glad there's litter, but it shows at least we've gone mainstream. Let's get back to the origin. I want to come back. Yeah, I want to get back to plant-based meat in a little bit because I know that you all don't really serve it at the restaurant, and we want to get into that. But let me ask just about the origin. So, Kate, you mentioned that you joined up in 2001. I know that you all were working at the restaurant. This, I presume, was like an office place connection that you guys made. But what was the genesis for you that led you to be interested in this in the first place?
Well, if you remember, we bumped into each other at the DuPont Circle Metro. This is going way back. You were handing out flyers for COK. I think it said like, why go vegan? And I looked at the flyer and I'm like, I already am. It's cool. And I think we were just like, cool, spirits.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned this. So I do remember that we talked about this, but that wasn't necessarily the origin story for you, right? That was like an interesting connection that it was sometime, I think maybe like around 2000 or the late 90s. I think I was passing out brochures in Washington, D.C., and I gave you a brochure. But I think that you were already interested in animals before that, or am I mistaken in that?
Yeah, so I was about 16 years old, and I was sort of introduced to the idea of being vegetarian. And I was doing a summer program that was 5 weeks, and I'm like, I'll try it for 5 weeks. And lo and behold, I didn't look back. I was like, this is easy. Cool. And actually, there was one thing. There was this weird like chicken salad on a croissant that I said, I will always eat that. And I went and I had it. And I was like, oh God, how did I ever eat this stuff? It was really chewy, I remember. And so I guess after that one, I never looked back. But then flash forward to college, and I remember understanding then what vegan meant. You know, originally, kind of like with your story, when I first told my mom that I was going to go vegetarian, the first thing she did, she got me like a hummus bagel sandwich. She's like, you're going to need more protein. So there was always that idea, like, if you're going to go vegetarian, you need to watch out for protein. And then into college, it was sort of, if you go vegan, what about calcium and all these other things? So it was sort of I don't know if it was a challenge, I guess. I was like, I'm going to meet this challenge. So originally, if I approached vegetarianism for animal rights reasons, then I took it a step further, knowing that my dad had tremendous heart health issues. I thought, human health wise, this is good, I'll go vegan. But then it was around the time, like prior to running into you, that on this college campus, internet's all over the place, learning really about the environmental impact of the animal industry. So it's sort of a no-brainer. I mean, no, it wasn't sort of, it really was a no-brainer. It was like, why would I do this if I don't have to? And of course, this was a couple years after I had dined at Rich's restaurant, Horizons Cafe. So I knew that there was tremendous culinary amazement to be had, right? Like there was great food happening. You did not need to eat meat. So, you know, I was kind of exploring it on my own, cooking at home, like, you know, on my own. But then after I graduated, I went to get a summer job working with this guy. And it was fantastic. I not only worked on the front of house, but got to prep a little bit in the back with him and started to learn a lot about how he was transforming food. And again, he was completely self-taught. There was nobody doing this. There were no YouTube videos showing you how to do it. There was nothing. So everything that he did was just because he wanted to eat well. And I quickly became his sidekick and was like, well, I want to bake well too. So, you know, it's just kind of like one thing after another. Not only learning the basics of what made us tick as foodies who really wanted to eat just as well as anybody else in the world, but then paying attention to the culture of dining and the culture of the restaurant industry. We knew very quickly that we needed a liquor license to be taken very, very seriously. So we went from suburban Philly down to downtown Philly. And, you know, again, that the origin story is becoming much longer. One thing leading to another, we just recognized how important it was if we wanted to be taken as a legitimate culinary experience, that we would have to push ourselves, not just with the food, but with the service and with the space.
So what was the genesis of your thinking regarding how you wanted to make this a restaurant that did not focus necessarily on the protein, but on vegetables, right? So you changed from Horizons to Vedge, Vedge, in order to have this celebration of vegetables. But, you know, you look at a lot of the restaurants, including the higher ends ones, like they would have like, you know, seitan roasts and other really proteinaceous products, whereas Vedge is really more vegetable centric, right? What was the thinking on this? Were you trying to zig when others were zagging, so to speak? Or did you just love vegetables so much, or you just thought that people were going to want vegetables?
No, the former. I mean, we didn't want to follow any path that was already out there because none of them were leading to, you know, where we wanted to be. most vegan restaurants back then, they just weren't what we aspired to be. No offense to any of them, because I've eaten at many of them, and the food's wonderful. It's just not how we wanted to be identified. I love vegetables, but even more so, I love protein. I love tofu. I love seitan. I love the occasional Beyond Burger, and I love the occasional, imitation poultry product. It's how I grew up. It's what I ate, and it literally speaks to me emotionally. It is my comfort food. So, but I also noticed that the biggest problem in our industry is that, especially my original place was inside a health food store. Everyone coming in was just like, they're on like caricatures of themselves. I mean, they were, you just saw it, there's the hippie dude and there's the lady with nothing to do this, and there's the dude who just smoked too much weed, and here's the person who thinks they're dying but isn't and needs, they were just like this parade of characters. And even as we expanded and got bigger and became like a legitimate restaurant, it was a very, very identifiable crowd that we had in there. And I'm like, you know what? We're not reaching the mainstream. We're not reaching the peripheral crowd that goes out to Rittenhouse Square. Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia is like our Central Park. It's like our fancy area in town. We weren't reaching that crowd. The older crowd, the baby boomers, the ones that go out for, chicken cordon bleu and prime rib and all that. We wanted them. I said, we are not legitimate until we have everyone eating in this restaurant. I don't care who they are, what they believe in. If they never eat another vegan meal, I want them in here to experience this, just so they can see that what we do has legitimacy. And that's what we set out to do. And I thought that this crowd does not want to see tofu and seitan on the menu. Because you know what? We've heard all the jokes, man. I mean, I still hear them all the day. Satan, come on. What the hell's a tofu? So, we took them all off the menu.
Yeah. So speaking of jokes, your commentary about the crowd that was being attracted to at the health food stores reminds me of the old joke that, what's the biggest impediment to widespread veganism? It's vegans, obviously.
100%.
So, yeah. And it's always like fun to have some self-deprecating humor about ourselves here. But, even in addition to focusing on vegetables, you guys, as you alluded to earlier, and you kind of have been sort of famous for this, is not even talking about vegan, right? Like some places want to be proud and say this is a vegan restaurant, but the V word to you all is like a scarlet letter. And I've noticed this as well there are some plant-based products that want to put vegan front and center, and there's others like a Beyond that would never do this, right? And the research is very clear on this. If you want to attract vegans, you might want to use the vegan word, but vegans are far less than 1%, right? If you want to attract the mainstream audience, using vegan on the front of pack is very clearly detrimental to.
Well, I said this from day one. I said the vegetarians and vegans will be at this restaurant no matter what. They'll find we're all desperate. We're all starving for a great meal, for the next great experience. They'll be there no matter what. You got to reach out to the mainstream, and that's why we never touch the V word.
Yeah, I've written about this, so I'll include a link in the show notes for this episode at businessforgoodpodcast.com. But the study after study shows that if you want to reduce demand for a product, label it vegan. Like it's just so clear. And even on restaurant menus, studies show that if you have a separate vegetarian or vegan section on the menu, you will reduce demand for the items in that section than if you just intersperse them throughout the rest of the menu, like in a conventional restaurant. And I totally,
I agree with that entirely. It's the whole reason, getting back to opening Vedge, why did we rebrand from Horizons to Vedge? We chose the name because obviously we wanted to kind of hint at what we do. So Vedge pretty much says it, right? We chose that spelling because we didn't want it to be that stereotypical veg thing. So the spelling was fun. But again, it comes back to this idea of like cast the broadest net, that same idea. Like we are talking about food here and not a lifestyle. And if you make the food really delicious, people will want it and they can feel included. If you label it, you automatically set up some kind of boundary and then people have to jump that hurdle or not. And the idea was just set a good example, make it just so delicious that everybody's going to want to try it. And, it wasn't feeling like any kind of sacrifice. Like you could participate without feeling like you were saying something about your identity. You know?
Oh, sure. I mean, vegetables are food, vegan's a lifestyle. It comes all back to that. So it was a very, very conscious decision. And we really, we've still got plenty of vegans and vegetarians. They're all there. It's just, and we'll talk to them secretly about it.
Well, that's the other thing. It's sort of like, we just don't want people to tell us how to live our life or what to do. Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't want to do that to anybody else. And I feel like I've shared that advice sometimes with some customers. And I have one in mind who's had been like hardcore, strict vegan. And, I kind of told her that our approach was really just to not make anybody feel put off, but to welcome everybody. And you didn't have to be vegan to eat here. And I think that having that approach helped her. She said, you know what, when I would go to family dinners and I was so strict and I couldn't participate and I had to bring my own food, it made everybody feel uncomfortable. She's like, but I loosened up just the slightest bit, and now it's like so much better. People are way more welcoming to her and she feels more comfortable. So I think in the long run, you talk about sustainability, the sustainability of veganism or plant-based, you have to just exist and coexist. And, there's going to be roller coasters in everything, and restaurant profitability and dining trends, even in an individual's own choices and what they're eating throughout points in their life. And I think the idea is like, always just try to chip away and continue to strive for that goal.
Yeah. So you have mentioned the longevity, the sustainability. Vedge has existed for a long time. It's a profitable restaurant. You guys actually make a living from doing this. But so many others have not been able to do that. Rich, earlier in the conversation, you said you just think that you all have managed your money well, right? That you've been, let's say, more frugal than others might have been with their capital, so they couldn't take home 30 out of that 100. Is there any other secret to your success that you think that if somebody else is either running a restaurant or thinking about running a restaurant, that you would offer for them? Like anything that you would recommend that you all think that you've done well, aside from just, being frugal with your money?
Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, I don't even know if we're being frugal. I think it's just a matter of being intelligent and knowing, when to spend and where to spend when the sales get a little lean. I mean, I guess you could call that frugal. To me, it's just like the smart allocation of funds. Where do you want to focus? Do you buy things you don't really need at times when the sales aren't rolling in? And when the sales are rolling in, do you spend recklessly on things that, we always use the term gathering nuts. May is a very busy month for us. The first week of June is not. So, you save when it's busy. So that first week of June, that payroll run isn't as painful. But, to me, I think that it's a work ethic when it comes down to it. You cannot have a restaurant without a work ethic, a very, very strong work ethic and involvement. Now, we're not present every day at Vedge anymore. We've moved out to the country. We live about 40 minutes away. So we're not there every single day anymore, but we're in touch constantly. We are in touch with the numbers. We're in touch with our staff. We watch the reservations. We watch how the flow. We never checked out from it. And I think the kiss of death in the restaurant business is if you just say, well, I'm all fully staffed, let me just let it run. Absolutely impossible. It's the kiss of death. So we stay very involved and very aware of what's happening there. You got to have your finger on the pulse. And we also know, having done this for so many years now, we know so many of our guests so very well. And when they talk to us about their experience there, we listen, not directly to what they're saying, but what they're kind of saying, what they're saying underneath of it. You've got to learn to read the actual language that people are talking to you in. So beyond that, I just don't know. I mean, you just got to make sure your product is something people really want. Give up the artist and start cooking for them. Remember the movie The Big Night, where the saying was, the first year you cook for them, and then after that you cook what you want to cook for them. I don't know if that's really true. You got to really cook for your audience. If you want them in there, you've got to give them food they want to eat.
Speaking of your guests, are there any particular guests who you've had who were either well-known folks or folks who you were really psyched to have in there when you saw them walk in?
Oh, tons of them. Sure. Yeah. Tons. Yeah.
We try to just let them dine though, and, make sure that they had a great time. The biggest one is when they come back, and you're like, oh, great.
If they're in town for a shoot and they come back the next night. No, they're just guests to us. They're just diners. We charge them double, but they're just our diners, I'm just kidding.
It reminds me of one time I was at Crossroads in Los Angeles, which is another very nice restaurant. And I was there, and Al Pacino and Robert De Niro walked in together, and they were like quickly ushered to a back room. And they just walked in like it was just like normal that they were going to a restaurant. And I remember like it was like time stopped as they walked by, and I was watching them go by.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, it's easy to get starstruck, I think, but at the end, they're just two dudes who are there for dinner.
We do have a back entrance, and there was one night there was a party that came in. There were about 8 of them, maybe 10, and it was very quiet. Nobody was saying anything, and our staff was super cool. But somehow somebody must have leaked it, because there was like a local paparazzi person who was camped out in the back and got pictures. I was like, what? That's crazy. So yeah, Philly doesn't maybe get all of the stars, but we get our share, and it's nice that they come to Vedge. So.
Yeah, and some of them are friends of ours, who we keep in touch with. So, but at the end of the day, it's just dinner. To me, my philosophy has always been, this is one thing we have in common with every human being on the planet. All the great cuisines of the world, whatever country you live in, whatever religious belief you may have, whoever you are, wherever, we all have to eat dinner. And so do the celebrities. And at that moment, when we're lifting that fork to our mouths, we are just all one. We are just the same person getting that meal. So we try not to make a big deal about it,
Very nice. All right. Well, I when I come there, I hope you don't make a big deal. I know there'll probably be paparazzi in the back.
Yeah.
We will be very chill.
I will tell you one quick funny story, though, and I don't mind mentioning their names because I've told this so many times before, but I was a huge Star Trek: The Next Generation geek forever. I thought it was one of the greatest shows on TV. Right there, yeah. So they touched on subjects in the 90s that third rail subjects that just are, hot button topics today that they were kind of exploring, indirectly through their storytelling back then. And I just love the show. I was never an original Star Trek fan. I didn't like anything that came after it, but The Next Generation was something special. Anyway, I'm walking through the bar at Vedge one day, and this lady calls me over, and she's like, "Are you the chef?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh my God, I love this food." She's like, "I'm Gates McFadden, and this is Michael Dorn from Star Trek: The Next Generation." And I said, "Oh my God." And she went, "Oh my God." And I said, "Oh my God." And this lasted for what seemed like 10 minutes. But they're both vegan. Michael Dorn, who plays Worf, is vegan. And they've been back several times with different members of the cast. That was a starfucker moment for me.
I'll tell you a fun fact about Star Trek. So Leonard Nimoy, who of course plays Spock, he's now dead, but was a vegetarian, and made his character Spock a vegetarian as well. And so both the actor and the character are both vegetarian because, Vulcans are supposed to be hyperlogical, and being vegetarian was a logical thing to do. And so that was all part of like his creation of this character. And also another fun fact about it is the Vulcan salute, right? Like I'm showing you the Vulcan salute, live long and prosper. That Leonard Nimoy himself added that to the character. So he had seen as a young boy in synagogue, he had seen his rabbi doing this. If you ever look at like rabbis that are doing blessings, they'll often do what we now know as the Vulcan salute, but for centuries they've been doing that. And so he thought that was like a cool way to make a salute. And then he added that to the character. So anyway, I'm a big yeah. Yeah.
That would be a very interesting story if Worf ever became vegan on Star Trek. A Klingon becoming vegan. That would be an awesome story.
Yeah, that really would be. But anyway, if you are interested, there's a really good documentary called For the Love of Spock, which is about Leonard Nimoy's life. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, I too am a TNG fan for sure. But anyway, I want to ask you, you both are self-taught. You've come at this and created a successful, not just one restaurant, but constellation of restaurants that you own or operate. And I imagine that there are many people who look at your success and think, I want to do something like them. How did they do it? Right? You didn't go to the CIA. You didn't have the formal training. You self-taught for the culinary arts and baking arts. Are there resources that you would recommend? Anything that was actually helpful for you? I'm sure that the experience in and of itself was the most helpful, but was there anything that was useful for you, either from a culinary perspective or from a business perspective, that you would recommend for people to check out?
Well, I think honestly, just the idea of starting really small within your means and working your ass off. And then once it's almost like gambling, like you put in a little bit, and once you start to have winnings, you only play with that. So not that I gamble, but that would be my suggestion is like, do your research, get in there with a little bit of seed money that you earned, right? And like, it's your own money. You're going to really take care of it. That's another thing. Like, we've only ever worked with our own funds. So when we do something, we really want to do it well, and we're going to manage it very cautiously because it's our own. So I would say only then grow when it really makes sense. People come to us and say, should I go to culinary school? I want to have a restaurant. And we're like, listen, only do this industry, only open a restaurant, only do this if you can't not do it. Because it is not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of work, especially early on. If you're in it, you are going to miss all kinds of family gatherings. You're going to miss holidays. I mean, it's really, really challenging. And I think nowadays with the sort of focus on a work-life balance, restaurants seem even wackier. Why would you want to do this? Because you're working at night and you're working on holidays. And, Valentine's Day is not something that we care about as person, between the two of us. It's just like, what? So it's a lifestyle choice, really. But if you can't not do it modestly, work your butt off. And then I think once you have that real world experience, then go ahead, get all the credentials you want. Go and, take this or that class. I found it very helpful to become a certified sommelier because it sort of entered me into a slightly different realm that I wasn't really getting without that sort of direction. Once you have those chops, go and talk to people and try to do stages. I think that's another thing, that our kitchen is always too small to accommodate a big range of interns or stages. But I generally think kitchens seem to be pretty excited to welcome people in. If you're very enthusiastic about, ferments, or you're very enthusiastic about a certain style of cuisine, asking for a stage, I think, is a great idea. People are very flattered to talk about their food. So I think making those kinds of connections are, it's hit or miss. Sometimes people are too busy for you, but I think that you shouldn't be afraid to reach out and just connect on a culinary level.
I'll also add to that, when you mention resources, we've tried to look at a few things. You have to keep in mind that what we did or have done did not exist anywhere. And we knew this. We wanted to, it wasn't think outside the box, it was build the box. We really we were doing something that no one had really ever pulled off. And so we start to look at a few things. How do you keep restaurant costs in check? And, I'd pull this up and they talk about food costs. I'm like, all right, food costs, we're doing great. And then they're like, labor costs. I'm like, oh man, oh boy, wow. It takes a lot of work to, get a carrot to taste like a steak. So there's really no great model for a vegan restaurant on an upscale level that kind of was paving the way for us. There's some common sense stuff, don't get me wrong. But when it came down to just numbers, and it was a lot of learning the hard way. I'll tell you that we used to be open 6 nights at Vedge, and it takes a little while. The first year is brutal. In any restaurant you open up, first year is brutal. Second year, you start to get your ducks in a row, and then you can get things together. But, we were open 6 nights, but this was in 2017 or so. Every restaurant in Philly, every, big name restaurant was open 6 nights, and they started to open the 7th night. Philly was just on fire. Everybody wanted you all the time. So we said, well, we're the only, bigger name restaurant in town that's not open 7 nights. We got to do this. We opened 7 nights and the books went way out of whack. The labor skyrocketed. The only thing that got better was the rent percentage. It came down by 2%. The labor skyrocketed, and even the food costs, because you don't have the right management structure there all the time to watch the food the way it was, being managed. On a Saturday night when you're closed on Sunday, you're watching what you're prepping. When you're open 7 nights, you just prep, and things get out of control. They get lost. So we actually, even though we increased our sales by opening 7 nights, we lost some profit by doing that. And then all of a sudden, more is not more. And we kept trying to fix it until the pandemic fixed it for us. And now we're only open 5 nights. And it, again, took us about 1.5 years to figure out how to get Vedge profitable on a 5-night model. And we did. It's not the same. It will never be the same as pre-pandemic, but we managed to get it rolling. And I think that's one of the problems, is that it's very rare to have a restaurant open, a fine dining restaurant that's open 7 nights a week right now. The staff doesn't want it. Nobody wants it. I don't want it. I mean, it's a horrible amount of strain and stress and lifestyle sacrifice. Who wants it? We all learned that during the pandemic. So how do you make it work? Well, a lot of people aren't. It's very, very challenging.
Indeed, yeah, it certainly is. And Kate, your reference to work-life balance reminds me of something that I read recently where there was a successful founder of a company and he was asked about work-life balance and he said, I think it sounds good, but I would hate to recommend something that's the exact opposite of what I did to succeed, which is,
Oh, that's exactly it, man. Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So finally, let me ask you guys, are there any companies or products that you wish existed? Is there something that you wish that you could serve at the restaurant that you don't have access to, or some other company or restaurant that you hope somebody listening will found themselves?
Yeah, so I'm actually working with Rich to create an app that can transform any existing recipe into a veg recipe.
Ah, fun. Okay, cool.
I haven't found one that exists, so
yeah, I've not heard of that. That sounds fun.
You would know, wouldn't you?
I think that I would, but I don't know. There's so much that happens in the world that I don't hear about, so I don't know. But yeah, that sounds like a pretty interesting idea. Okay, cool. I feel like there's an AI component of that would make it pretty easy, right? Like
Yes.
that would inform what the app gives people.
Yes. But I don't know. Maybe the technology needs some help.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that's a cool idea. Are there any other ideas of things that don't exist yet or that don't exist in the form that you wish it did that you hope will come into fruition?
I think a lot of the things that I wanted about 5 or 6 years ago have actually really, they've come around. Oscar Mayer is making a vegan hot dog now that is very, very good. And this is funny because it's psychological. There's a lot of great vegan hot dogs out there, and I loved hot dogs when I was a kid. And you gotta try them on like one of those white squishy death buns. You can't use the whole wheat bun or anything. You just got to go for it with yellow mustard. You just got to dive into that. So I've loved most of the vegan hot dogs that are out there, but there's something psychological about walking down the aisle and seeing Oscar Mayer plant-based, knowing that a company massive as they are, that has been known for basically, is identified with animal slaughter, mass animal slaughter to get their products on there, is now making a vegan hot dog. There's something so rewarding about that I really have never been able to explain. But I love that the big companies are starting to embrace this. I think you have to look at what's happening with vegan restaurants and vegan products as like the stock market. We've got to look at long game. I think we're in a little bit of a dip right now. I think there's perception out there that has been, I think it got too big, and there's companies out there that are, used to the way things were, want them to be back there. And there's a little threat going on, and they're saying back off, and they're going to great lengths to make sure that people kind of change their minds. But we're only in a lull right now. It will be back. Listen, what we do at Vedge is just good food. That will never go away. I don't think a fake hot dog or fake burger will ever go away. It just might not be as popular as it once was, but it's not going to go away. So what would I like people to invent? I'd like really, really big companies. I salute all the upstarts, by the way. Don't get me wrong. I'd like the really, really big companies to stop, to just say, listen, if I can't beat them, join them. And I'd like to see more companies like Oscar Mayer doing something, plant-based like that.
Rich, I couldn't possibly agree with you more. I think that if we're going to win, it's going to be by working with the big food companies, not trying to compete against them in a David and Goliath battle. Even though in that case, David won, David usually does not win. So I completely agree with you. And, interestingly, plant-based meat has existed for over 1,000 years, right? Like ancient China had plant-based meat literally more than 1,000 years ago. There's going to be people who want to mimic meat in some way. And some brands will do well. There are some brands even today that seem to be doing fairly well, especially like in the plant-based dairy space. And others aren't. I saw, sadly, even tuna, which has been around for decades, that just declared bankruptcy. So it's it's such a shame to see. But I feel like we're in a winter, and just like if we're in a winter, that means that there will be a spring. And I feel the same that is coming.
100%. And also, listen, we have to. I salute anyone who's going to do this upstart. But listen, if you have an ice cream shop on the street and someone else opens up an ice cream shop on the same block, and then the third person opens up an ice cream shop on the same block, I don't know who really wins. And it's really tricky. You don't ever want to discourage anyone from following their dreams or starting this wonderful new, what could be the next Boca Burger or Beyond Burger. But man, there's a lot of products out there right now.
Yeah. I still really like the Boca chicken patties, actually. I think they're quite good.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
But as somebody who did decide to do a startup to try to bring a new ingredient to the space, a mycelium-based ingredient to try to make a whole food, non-processed, proteinaceous ingredient, I definitely am rooting for the startups as well, just as you are, I know. Yeah. So listen, Kate, Rich, I'm excited for the success that you've had. It shows that plant-based can succeed in the restaurant world and can have real longevity, which you all have had. So my hat is off to you, and I'm grateful for all that you've done. It's done a world of good for animals. And as somebody who has personally enjoyed not only food from your restaurants, but also from your cookbook, I've benefited myself. So I say thank you to both of you, and may this blossom into something even bigger.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having us on, man. That was great.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please let the world know. Leave the show a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and share the episode with your friends. Who knows? Maybe you'll inspire one of them to be in the business of doing good themselves.